Reading the Times for Monday, March 2nd, 2020. As Buttigieg exits race, Biden seeks edge against Sanders on Super Tuesday. The Democratic presidential campaign took a dramatic turn on Sunday as a top candidate, former Mayor Pete Buttigieg, quit the race and started clearing the way for moderate voters to coalesce around candidates better positioned to stop Senator Bernie Sanders, the liberal frontrunner for the party's nomination. The departure of Mr. Buttigieg could lift Mr. Biden's political fortunes heading into the major Super Tuesday primaries, but might also benefit other candidates, particularly Senator Elizabeth Warren and former Mayor Michael R. Bloomberg, who also hold appeal with swaths of Mr. Buttigieg's supporters. Mr. Buttigieg spoke with Mr. Biden on Sunday, and the former vice president asked him for his support. Afghanistan war enters new stage as U.S. military prepares to exit. The Taliban, as a condition of a peace deal, could seek to dismantle or take over the Afghanistan intelligence agency and end its work with the CIA. Some current and former officials believe finding a way for the CIA and its militia forces to continue to work with a new Afghan government, one that includes the Taliban, is critical to the long-term survival of such a deal. Having the United States military or intelligence agency work with its enemy of nearly 2 decades may seem like an impossibility to some, but it has been an offer from the Taliban for nearly a decade, and the American military has already taken its first tentative step towards such a wary partnership, said David Kilcullen, a former advisor to the United States government in Iraq and Afghanistan. Last year, the United States conducted airstrikes against the Islamic State in Afghanistan, which had the effect of helping the Taliban forces that were fighting the group, said Mr. Kilcullen, the author of a new book on the future of global conflict called The Dragons and the Snakes. Coronavirus may have spread in U.S. for weeks, gene sequencing suggests. Researchers who have examined the genomes of 2 coronavirus infections in Washington state say similarities between the cases suggest the virus may have been spreading in the state for weeks. Based on an analysis of the virus's genetic sequence, another case that surfaced in the state and was announced on Friday probably was descended from the first case. A scientist who was not involved in the analysis said he agreed with the conclusion that the second case was connected to the original Washington case. A Trump insider embeds climate denial in scientific research. An official at the Interior Department embarked on a campaign that has inserted misleading language about climate change, including debunked claims that increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is beneficial, into the agency's scientific reports, according to documents reviewed by the New York Times. In Interior Department emails to scientists, Mr. Goklani pushed misleading interpretations of climate science, saying it may be overestimating the rate of global warming for whatever reason. Climate modeling has largely predicted global warming accurately. Mr. Goklani's Interior Department responsibilities expanded substantially in the early months of the Trump administration, where he was elevated by the Trump appointees to a position guiding the Interior Department's climate policy, and began attending senior-level meetings and weighing in on early policy moves such as changes to the department's website. Why some suburban women are wary of Bernie Sanders. Ann Pogue, a retired nurse who lives in Virginia Beach, in a House district that a Democrat wrestled from a Republican incumbent in 2018, noted that Mr. Trump's top argument for re-election would be the economy, with Mr. Sanders as a perfect foil. If Democrats want a nominee who's a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat, a proud Democrat, an Obama-Biden Democrat. Join us, Biden said. There were potential warning signs for Democrats in the polls should Mr. Sanders become the nominee. Nearly 1 in 5 suburban Democrats say they would not support him against Mr. Trump in November. In India, Modi's policies have lit a fuse. In public, Mr. Modi's language was mostly free of the Hindu nationalist rhetoric that would have set off more worry. Mr. Modi appointed Hindu extremists to top government posts, including Yogi Adityanath, the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, India's largest state, who has called Muslims a crop of two-legged animals and promised to wage a religious war. Mr. Modi usually tries to stay above the fray, but he slipped up in December when he said the arsonists could be identified by the clothes, widely seen as a dig at India's Muslims, who sometimes dress differently from Hindus. Israeli slugfest, the campaign in pictures. In deadlocked race ahead of Monday's vote, Benny Gantz, the former Israeli army chief, is trying to unseat Benjamin Netanyahu, the longtime prime minister whose criminal trial on bribery and other corruption charges is set to begin on March 17th. At a culminating rally on Saturday night, Mr. Gantz, 60, told supporters that Mr. Netanyahu acts like a mafioso. He said Mr. Netanyahu would stop at nothing to retain power, even if it meant tampering with the election, passing new laws to get himself out of legal jeopardy, or overturn the Supreme Court decisions. Iron polls showing Mr. Gantz's blue and white party slipping behind Mr. Netanyahu's Likud party, and Mr. Netanyahu pulling away on the question of who is more suitable to lead. Mr. Gantz darkly warned voters that a vote for anyone but him was a vote to keep Mr. Netanyahu in office. Residents in the official residence on Jerusalem's Balfour Street, and for the end of Israeli democracy. Yes. As another election looms, Israelis ponder politics and contagion. For passengers hurrying through the departure halls of Israel's main airport on Sunday, many with their faces covered by masks, there was one big conundrum. Should they stay or should they go? One right-wing activist joked that colleagues should stand outside polling stations in Mr. Gantz's strongholds, wearing face masks to deter voters. At Ben Gurion Airport, just outside Tel Aviv, dueling forms of angst swirled through the departure and arrival halls on Sunday. Some passengers returning to vote, others worrying that they risked infection by leaving. The Israel election, round 3, here's what you need to know. Mr. Netanyahu's right-wing bloc consists of his own Likud party, a secular conservative group, and a handful of ultra-orthodox and far-right parties. Since Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Gantz both back the proposal, the election has instead become a plebiscite on Mr. Netanyahu himself. Most parties are privately dreading another costly election cycle that drains party coffers, erodes trust in the political process, and jams the economy. Fear of coronavirus leaves the faithful without mass in Italy's north. The difference between participating in the mass in a church and watching it on TV is like the difference between sitting next to a warm bonfire that warms up, illuminates, brings joy, and watching a picture of the fire. Milan's Archbishop Mario Delpini said on Sunday, as he celebrated a regional broadcast mass without congregants inside the crypt of Milan's empty cathedral. Church leaders in the north have asked the regional authorities to let the faithful attend Mass. The Roman Catholic Patriarch of Venice, Francesco Moraglia, said this week he would ask the regional government of Veneto, which has also closed churches and schools amid the outbreak, to allow the celebration of Mass, citing the assertion of early Christians that without communion we cannot leave. Francisco Ferraro, a sacristan of the Santa Maria Annunziata in Chiesa Rossa Church in Milan, said older people did not understand that they could not go to Mass, even during World War II. They used to gather even more and pray together. Giovanna Mazzola, 72, said she watched 3 separate Masses on television, but came to church anyway, and was saddened to see people sitting far away from one another. After factory disease, Bangladesh made big safety strides. Are the bad days coming back? With the international monetary deal winding down, Bangladesh's factory workers, many of whom serve in parliament or who own newspapers and television stations, want to return responsibility for safety to Bangladesh. Inspected factories improved at only a 2% rate, compared with 6% in 2018, 9% in 2017, and 22% in 2016. A total of 1,101 factories remain behind schedule to addressing safety hazards, with 45% still lacking adequate fire detection and alarm systems. Bangladesh's workers outside factories tracked by safety groups don't have a voice at all, said Peter McAllister, the executive director of the Ethical Trading Initiative, and based in London. Afghan peace plan faces its first roadblock, releasing Taliban prisoners. In the agreement signed on Saturday, the United States said it would facilitate the release by March 10th of up to 5,000 Taliban prisoners held by the Afghan government and 1,000 members of the government security forces from the Taliban side. Across the country on Sunday, Afghans were grappling with whether the deal could actually be a first step toward lasting peace, or plunge back into a chapter where extremists could again dominate society and governance, as happened during the Taliban rule in the late 1990s. If we have long and permanent peace, we will be saving the nation, said Jan Mohammed, a taxi driver in Kandahar city. Atikullah Amarkel, a retired Afghan army general and military analyst, said he believed the deal was ambiguous at best, but could at least pave the way to intra-Afghan talks between the government and the Taliban. At center of Taliban deal, the U.S. envoy who made it personal. A key difference in what Mr. Khalilzad was willing to do was this. He moved to talk with the Taliban directly, hear them out at length, and agree to their divisive demand to discuss a troop withdrawal without the U.S. allied Afghan government at the table. James Dobbins, a former American special envoy to Afghanistan and Mr. Khalilzad's one-time boss, said a sense of regret over the abandonment has perhaps reaffirmed Mr. Khalilzad's commitment. In essence, Mr. Khalilzad has been juggling several negotiations at once: discussions with an extremely divided Afghan political elite in Kabul, shuttle diplomacy with countries of a region in turmoil, and talks with the Taliban insurgents in Doha. Once the Taliban came to the table, the problem was not just the deep mistrust. Turkey declares major offensive against Syrian government. Turkey's defense minister Hulusi Akar announced the counteroffensive on television in a statement distributed by the state-run Anadolu news agency, saying the operation in northern Syria was intended to end the war and stop a Syrian government offensive that was displacing thousands of Syrians. Since the attack on Thursday, Turkey has retaliated with strikes on Syrian government forces in and around Idlib and farther afield, including a chemical weapons storage facility south of Aleppo and a government air defense system in Idlib, according to Turkish officials. Turkey has asked the United States to provide Patriot missiles to help it against Russian and Syrian air power, but Washington is demanding that Turkey first make inoperable the Russian S-400 missile defense system it acquired last year from Russia. Abortion case in Colombia could be a landmark in Latin America. A top court in Colombia is expected to rule in the coming days on whether to permit abortion during the first months of a pregnancy, a decision that could be a landmark in Latin America and have a ripple effect across the region, known for its restrictive laws. A Colombian law professor who lives in France, Miss Bernal, has asked the court to eliminate a few exceptions in existing Colombian law that allow for legal abortions. In a 2006 decision, the Constitutional Court allowed abortion in 3 circumstances: when a mother's life is at stake, when a fetus has serious health problems, and when a pregnancy resulted from rape. Slovakia has woken up. Governing party suffers decisive election defeat. The longtime governing party in Slovakia suffered a sweeping defeat in national elections on Saturday, paving the way for the new government coalition that promised to fight corruption and promote the rule of law. The election, in which Mr. Matovic's party won 25% of the vote, compared with 18% for the governing party, SMERSD, was a culmination of one of the most turbulent periods in Slovak politics. Many opposition groups in Eastern and Central Europe have failed to be more entrenched parties because they could not unify around a single person or a single party. Greece suspends asylum as Turkey opens gates for migrants. Greece deployed military forces at the country's northern border with Turkey on Sunday to fortify the area and repel a stream of migrants after Turkey opened the floodgates to the European Union over the weekend. The fortification of the border came after President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey confirmed on Saturday he was opening Turkey's border for migrants to enter Europe, saying that his country could no longer handle the huge numbers of people fleeing the war in Syria. On the Turkish side of the border, where thousands were gathering and smugglers were flocking to offer rides, boats, and other services, others were less fortunate, and the hazards of crossing the border were becoming clear. Months after Puerto Rico earthquakes, thousands are still living outside. In the past week alone, the Puerto Rico seismic network registered 43 significant quakes, leaving many people fearful of going home. The bulk of the people outside their homes has been denied aid because they had insufficient damage to their homes or had insurance, the records show. Jennifer Santos Hernandez, a research professor at the University of Puerto Rico who has visited the camps, said the authorities have not done enough to provide temporary housing near people's homes. Pete Buttigieg drops out of the Democratic presidential race. Pete Buttigieg, the former small city Indiana mayor and first openly gay major presidential candidate, has decided to quit the Democratic race. A person briefed on Mr. Buttigieg's plans said on Sunday, following a crushing loss in South Carolina primary, where his poor performance with black Democrats signaled an inability to build a broad coalition of voters. In the last presidential debate on Tuesday in South Carolina, Mr. Buttigieg forcefully warned that nominating Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, the frontrunner, would lead to crushing defeat in the fall. Not just 4 more years of Donald Trump, but the loss of the Democratic House majority secured by moderate candidates who won in suburban swing districts in 2018. But Mr. Buttigieg's own existential crisis was his inability to appeal to voters of color, both African Americans and Latinos. In his quest to earn black support, Mr. Buttigieg spent more time visiting South Carolina than any other candidate, spent more on TV ads in the state than any candidate besides a billionaire Tom Steyer, and rolled out a sweeping proposal called the Douglas Plan to readdress the legacy of racism. How the Democrats' 15% rule could reshape the race on Super Tuesday. In each case, a candidate must win at least 15% of the vote to be eligible for those delegates. Candidates who fall short of the threshold statewide could still win a district-level delegate if they capture more than 15% of the vote in a congressional district. If only one candidate were to clear the bar in a given state or congressional district, even if she or he earned just 16% of the vote, that candidate would take home all the delegates in that area. Cuccinelli's appointment to immigration post is illegal, judge rules. The judge, Randolph D. Moss, United States District Court in Washington, he said the Trump administration violated a federal law that stipulates who can fill vacant leadership positions at federal agencies when Mr. Cuccinelli was tapped in June to become the acting director at the agency overseeing legal immigration. The statute relating to Mr. Cuccinelli's appointment is Federal Vacancy Reform Act, which says an official temporarily filing a cabinet-level position before Senate confirmation must be next in line of succession by serving as the first assistant or must have worked as a senior official in the agency for at least 90 days. Mark A. Morgan, serving as acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement before replacing John Sanders as the acting commissioner of Customs and Border Protection. Bloody Sunday commemoration draws Democratic candidates to Selma. The day before the ceremony, South Carolina's heavily black electorate shook up the Democratic race and handed former Vice President Joseph R. Biden Jr. the decisive victory. In the state's primary, two Democratic candidates, Mr. Biden and former Mayor Michael R. Bloomberg of New York, addressed the congregation. Following Mr. Biden's blowout win in South Kakalaka, his advisors are hoping that the former vice president will have enough momentum to overcome the gains Mr. Bloomberg has made. The three types of people you meet at a caucus. After a number of housekeeping measures, including the one which the voters agreed to treat one another with kindness and respect. And Ms. Felder explained the formula the party used to determine how many votes a candidate needs to be viable, that is, to receive any delegates at all. The voting began. Clicking some buttons on her iPad, Ms. Felder then revealed the results of each voting and added those early votes to the in-person votes, giving Mr. Sanders a total of 29, Mr. Buttigieg 15, Mr. Biden 13, and Ms. Warren 10. This is where it gets fun, she said, after a lot of complicated math that no one seemed to understand involving the early voters and their second-choice preferences and the realignment of the in-person caucus voters. The final vote came in. Michael Bloomberg, a billionaire, learning on the job. The attention of the political world was trained on Iowa and New Hampshire, where Mr. Bloomberg did not compete so hard anyone noticed the gaffe, like when he opened a campaign office in Denver in early February and joked about wishing someone else could have spoken for him so he could spend the day at his home in Vail, Colorado. His campaign strategy was never to pretend to have the feel your pain magic touch. It's not all about Trump, but there are useful moments when we can invoke Trump, compare Mike to him, and poke the bear, said Tim O'Brien, a journalist who wrote a biography about Mr. Trump and is now working as one of Mr. Bloomberg's senior advisors. The contrast to Mr. Trump is at the core of Mr. Bloomberg's campaign. Battle for control of Senate takes shape as both parties Sikh firewall. In Arizona, Senator Martha McSally, a Republican who has trailed in polls against her Democratic challenger, Mark Kelly, a former astronaut, hit Mr. Kelly as too liberal for the state in a recent ad entitled Bernie Bro. In Georgia, Senator Kelly Loeffler, a newly appointed Republican who will be on the ballot in November, declared in an ad that socialism risks everything that makes us great. Despite intense pressure from Senator Republican leadership and a hint from Mr. Trump that he could be named National Intelligence Director, Mr. Collins has refused to bow out, and the two Republicans are in an escalating feud. Democrats see as formidable their preferred candidate, Barbara Bollier, a state senator who left the Republican Party to become Democrat in 2018. Democrats and their allies are already pouring tens of millions of dollars into defeating the Republican incumbents Cory Gardner in Colorado, Susan Collins in Maine, Joni Ernst in Iowa, Mr. Tillis and Miss McSally, while taking a run at seats in Georgia, Kansas, and perhaps Texas. Texas lone GOP woman in Congress faces a stiff challenge from the right. In a primary race that reflects the internal struggles of the Republican Party under President Trump, Mr. Putman is attacking Miss Granger as not conservative enough for Texas' 12th congressional district and insufficiently supportive of the president. Mr. Putman told voters in an event earlier this month that Mr. Trump has endorsed Miss Granger only because of the politics of impeachment. He noted that the president had tweeted his support for the congresswoman on the eve of the House vote on articles of impeachment to ensure Miss Granger would stick with him and vote against the charges. The project, which has struggled to secure federal money despite Miss Granger's powerful perch on the House panel that allocates funding, has been under management of her son, J.D. Granger, who serves as the executive director. How the coronavirus is already being viewed through a partisan lens, as Mr. Trump and his allies have defended his actions and accused Democrats and the news media of fanning flames to bring down the president. A growing public health crisis has turned into one of the arenas for a bitter political battle, where facts are increasingly filtered through a partisan lens. Democrats accuse Mr. Trump of failing to respond adequately to the health threat and then politicizing it. Instead, at a rally on Friday in South Carolina, Mr. Trump called Democrats' concerns about coronavirus their new hoax, reprising the term used to dismiss his impeachment and the special counsel investigating into Russian election interference after Hurricane Maria shattered Puerto Rico in 2017, leaving thousands homeless or without power for months. Mr. Trump hailed himself in 2019 as the best thing that's ever happened to Puerto Rico and disputed the official estimates that about 3,000 people died because of the storm. A virus spreads, stocks fall, and Democrats see an opening to hit Trump. Asked on Friday in a CNN interview how bad he thought the economic woes from the virus could get, Mr. Biden replied, "Well, I'm less concerned about the immediate economic impact than I am about whether or not we gain control of this." He went on to criticize the Trump administration's response. Democratic strategists say the virus and its potential economic effects have given candidates a new opportunity to criticize Mr. Trump's management ability. Mr. Bloomberg said he had dealt with public health and economic crises as a mayor, as a philanthropist, and as a leader of his business, Bloomberg LP. So I understand the economic damage and the bad policies that bad policies can cause. I'm Mikey Bloomberg. I want to be your president. A war without winners winds down. The deal that Trump administration signed with Taliban on Saturday is a ticket out of Afghanistan for American troops who've been there far too long. Though not involved in talks, the Afghan government has been aware of the negotiations and under the agreement that Americans will continue funding and supporting the Afghan military. Afghanistan, much of it controlled by the staunchly Islamist Taliban, has provided sanctuary for Osama bin Laden, and so that is where American troops headed to wage President George W. Bush's war on terrorism and to seek retribution. Only doctors can save the markets from coronavirus. Investors in recent days have completely priced in a rate cut. At the Fed's next meeting in March, the theaters cannot increase ticket sales by cutting prices, nor can the government increase sales by cutting interest rates to put more money in the pockets of the workers. The Fed responded at the time by cutting interest rates, a mistake that contributed to the rise of inflation in the 1970s, but did not help to revive economic growth. Warnings from South Kakalaka. Second, for all the Democrats holding out hope that Michael Bloomberg, the billionaire carpetbagger, carrying the weight of his horrific racial history, could muscle his way into the races and force voters into submission and amnesia, South Kakalaka waved a giant red flag. In South Kakalaka, 83% of voters said that they attend religious services. Amen. Occasionally, or more often than that, there are lessons and considerations coming out of South Kakalaka. Every Super Tuesday vote must grapple with. We represented the whistleblower. The law needs urgent help. We were honored to represent the whistleblower who had smoothly transitioned to the new council, but we will continue to work as we have for years to strengthen the intelligence communities, the whistleblower system for future whistleblowers. Even member of Congress, individuals within the body that has created the statutory protections that exist for whistleblowers, sought to expose the whistleblower for political purposes and created harmful doubts concerning the integrity of the system. Joseph McGuire, until last week, the acting director of national intelligence, himself a appointee to Mr. Trump, stated in public testimony last September that the whistleblower acted in good faith and followed the law every step of the way. The whistleblower demonstrated that one can ensure the legitimate oversight occurs within confines of the law and the policies and procedures of the intelligence community. Would you pay higher gas prices to slow the climate crisis? You see, a plan is under development in about a dozen northeast and mid-Atlantic states and to tackle the country's biggest source of greenhouse emissions. Cut road congestion, clean up the air, improve public transit, and ramp up electric cars. The gasoline price increase would depend on how ambitious the states decide to be with their emissions cuts, which is one aspect of the plan that has not been fully decided. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, a Republican with a poor record on climate initiatives, pulled his state out of the discussions, declaring as he did so, "I will not force Granite Staters to pay more for their gas just to subsidize other states' crumbling infrastructure." Is Texas big enough for Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders? A master builder of Republican dominance in Texas and elsewhere has transitioned from evil genius to wise man. But the head-spinningest thing I have witnessed in a long time is Bernie Sanders' rise to within spitting distance of victory in the Texas Democratic primary on Super Tuesday. Some of the same people who engineered Mr. O'Rourke's rise, but not his fall, are former and current Sanders organizers who postulate that Texas isn't a Republican state, but a non-voting state. Flipping the Texas House has, for the first time since 2003, looked like a real possibility unless Mr. Sanders scares moderate voters away from the polls. Seeking gender parity in your letters. Men write letters to the editor more than women. And in the foreword to Talking Back to the New York Times, a book of letters to the editor from 1851 to 1971 that he edited, he wrote, "Who writes letters to the editor? Everyone does." Surprisingly, there's little formal research information available. Although one study about it, 10,000 letters, showed that men wrote 46% of all letters to the editor. A woman wrote 37%. The others weren't identifiable. Otherwise, let the opinion in the letter run on its own merits, okay? Without at the end outing the letter writer as male or as female. Disclosure of campaign donors. You offer a welcome response to a significant body of opinion from influential right and sometimes left-leaning civil liberties organizations that have opposed more disclosure obligations of the identity of large donors to political nonprofits on First Amendment grounds. In case after case, the Supreme Court has rejected objections to such disclosures, relying in one ruling on the First Amendment interest of individual citizens seeking to make informed choices in the political marketplace, in another on the critical interest of enabling the electorate to make informed decisions and give proper right to different speakers and messages, and in a third on disclosure offering a particular effective means of arming the voting public with information. The First Amendment is better served by more disclosure as to who is speaking rather than by less. Extend a nuclear arms treaty. The writers lament the unfortunate dissolution of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty last year. The treaty was signed in 1987 after President Ronald Reagan firmly countered Soviet aggression, with Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet president, turned to domestic liberalization and cooperation with America. For a long time, Washington and NATO criticized Moscow's violation of the INF Treaty. President Trump, a far cry from Mr. Reagan in other aspects, finally took countermeasures. Panic shopping for coronavirus supplies, but brunch is packed. A New York City Health Department said 2 more people have been tested for the virus or are awaiting results, bringing the total number tested to 11. New York City officials also said the Food and Drug Administration has approved their application to develop their own coronavirus test and would soon begin administering it in the city. New York City's tourism agency has already forecasted a decline in visitors from foreign countries before the virus spread to Italy and other countries. Coronavirus in New York. A Manhattan woman is first confirmed case in the state. Governor Andrew M. Cuomo on Sunday confirmed New York State's first case of the coronavirus, saying a woman contracted the virus while traveling in Iran and now is in New York isolated in her home. More than 70 people in the United States have been confirmed through laboratory testing to have the illness. The new virus is believed to have originated in the Chinese city of Wuhan late last year before spreading to more than 50 other countries. New York City had one of its least snowy winters on record. New York City's love-hate relationship with snow is, if you will, deep. And it was on display on Saturday in Prospect Park in Brooklyn. Chike Elizu, jogging in Central Park, said he grew up with tropical weather and associates New York snow with a lot of unpleasantness, but worries about global warming when it does not come. For people who grew up in New York sledding in the park and building snow forts in the piles left by plows, not just in, say, the notorious winter of 1978, but in most winters, the climate worries come with a dose of nostalgia. Former Barnard student accused of killing mother. Miss Jones plunged a large kitchen knife into her mother's chest, the police said. Later told a 911 operator she did it because her mother, that she tried to hurt her. According to the court documents released by the Union County Prosecutor's Office. The struggle continued several minutes later, the man told police, where he heard what sounded like dishes breaking in the kitchen area. The man told investigators that about 20 minutes later, he saw the younger Miss Jones running toward him, yelling, she tried to hurt me. According to the court records, after making his way to the kitchen, the man told police he found Enel Jones lying on the kitchen floor, bloodied, with a knife nearby. Wall Street has lost its nerve. What will it take to get it back? The dynamic repeatedly rewarded investors who use market setbacks as buying opportunities. The dynamic repeatedly rewarded investors who used market setbacks as buying opportunities. Even if markets see a short-term bounce, it could take longer to restore the investor confidence or complacency that pushed stocks to record highs a little more than a week ago. Analysts would watch government economic reports for indications that the news coverage of the virus on the markets tumble spooked shoppers and threatened consumption, the main engine of U.S. growth. Milken had key allies in pardon bid. Trump's inner circle. Mr. Milken hung up, got in his car, and drove to the home of his 96-year-old mother. Fernay Milken, according to Jeffrey Moore, Mr. Milken's spokesman. Mr. Milken appears to have benefited from the help of people, including Rudolph W. Giuliani, now the president's personal lawyer, and Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, who have close relationships with Mr. Trump and Mr. Milken. One of the few Milken supporters named by the White House who have no significant financial or personal ties to Mr. Milken or Mr. Trump is David Bahnsen, an investment advisor who wrote an unsolicited letter seeking a Milken pardon to the White House in 2017. But even he had White House connections. Intel's culture needed fixing. Its CEO is shaking things up. Other changes, some of which lean on the precepts of Andrew S. Rowe, the former Intel chief executive who coined the credo, "Only the paranoid survive," are Intel's biggest attitude adjustments in a decade. Intel's push to reduce a chip's circuit dimensions to 10 nanometers, or billionth of a meter, wasn't achieved until mid-2019, even though the advance had once been expected as early as 2015. The delay exposed Intel's overconfidence. Intel recruited Mr. Keller, an engineer known for stints in Apple and an Intel rival, Advanced Micro Devices, in July 2018 to spearhead other design changes. Why the success of the New York Times may be bad news for journalism. The first time I met A.G. Sulzberger, the publisher of the New York Times, I tried to hire him. The New York Times is going to basically be a monopoly, predicted Jim Van de Hey, the founder of Axios, which started in 2016 with plans to sell digital subscriptions, but has yet to do so. The Times will get bigger and the niche will get nichier, and nothing else will survive because the Times now overshadows so much of the industry. The cultural and ideological battles that used to break out between news organizations, like whether to say the President Trump lied, now play out inside the Times. Super Tuesday, state economies will test Democrats. In terms of their economies, these states share less in common with the rest of New England than with the Appalachian states like West Virginia and Kentucky, and with Midwestern industrial states like Ohio and Wisconsin. Similar states, Illinois, Maryland, New York. These groups include many East Coast states that are traditionally economic powerhouses, but that haven't looked like ones in recent years. Outside the big metropolitan areas, these states are dealing with many of the same issues: aging populations, lackluster job growth, that states in other categories are facing. Coronavirus and the workplace. What if the boss says to stay home? Nobody wants employees to come to work if they are sick or have been exposed to the virus, but U.S. workers are less likely to be covered by a paid sick leave policy than those in other developed countries. Paying workers in these situations will serve to incentivize employees to self-identify and self-quarantine, said Susan Gross-Shalinsky, a lawyer with Epstein, Becker, Green in New York. But American employers aren't obligated to pay most workers, which may affect the response of businesses, particularly smaller employers. Employers who are not paying for quarantine periods often let workers use vacation, sick time, personal days, and other available paid time off if workers have it. Avoiding coronavirus may be a luxury some workers can't afford. Service industry workers, like those in restaurants, retail, childcare, and the gig economy, are much less likely to have paid sick days, ability to work remotely, or employer-provided health insurance. The government recommended that people work from home in a coronavirus outbreak, but just 29% of American workers can do so, according to Labor Department data. Only 60% of workers in service occupations can take paid time off if they're ill, and they also are more likely than white-collar workers to come in contact with other people's bodies or food. This week in tech, coronavirus disrupts the industry. While hardware companies seem to be the most obvious candidates to face trouble, the impact is starting to ripple outwards to others less obvious internet companies. Dun & Bradstreet, the business research firm, said about 5,100 companies have one or more suppliers in the region of China affected by the virus, almost certainly leading to a broader impact in the months ahead. To try to keep their employees safe, some companies are taking preventative measures. Investors seem to be doing the same. Shares in Zoom, the teleconferencing software company, skyrocketed over the past week as more white-collar workers telecommute from home. The difference between worry, stress, and anxiety. How does stress work? In prehistoric times, stress was a natural response to a threat, like hearing a predator in the bushes. How does anxiety work? Remember how stress is a natural response to a threat? Well, anxiety is the same thing, except there's no threat. Here's a takeaway. Worry happens in your mind, stress happens in your body, and anxiety happens in your mind and your body. How to be good. The book tells the story of a doctor boldly navigating the rocky road of self-improvement. Just because I wasn't good, the protagonist he muses, it didn't mean I was bad. But as I reached the novel's end, I realized I had not arrived at the answer to what exactly it means to be good. Some people just flinch when they ponder whether or not they or others are good, because the word good and goodness have long been associated with obedience. The author and former Dear Sugars podcast host Cheryl Strayed, a very good woman, shared in a response to a query from the Times. Kindness is at the center of what it means to be good. It may require very little from us, or the opposite, it may require words and actions, or restraint and silence. Everything that can be said with kindness. Every tough position we have to take can be taken with kindness. No exceptions. Being a good person, that we work toward that unrealized world where the dignity and the integrity of all human beings, all life, are honored and respected. And today is Monday, March 2nd, 2020. This is Reading the Time. Thank you. Come again.